Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and this is FreePBX 101 version 15, part 12, where we are going to be digging into Sangoma phone provisioning as well as the Sangoma Endpoint Manager, or the FreePBX Endpoint Manager, which is free to use with Sangoma and Digium phones. And it will also provision a lot of other kinds of phones, Yealinks and Snoms and Polycoms and Ciscos. But if you want to provision anything that is not Sangoma or Digium, you have to pay for the Endpoint Manager, which is $145. If you're looking to purchase that license, go to crosstalksolutions.com/store, and we have it available for you right there. So let's hop right into it. Here we are at the dashboard of my Crosstalk PBX. And the first thing that we need to do for the Sangoma Endpoint Manager is make sure that we have our provisioning ports set up to use HTTPS. We want to do secure communication between our phone devices and the server itself. So we're going to come over here to Admin and then System Admin. And you want to find Port Management over here in the right-hand menu. Now, if you recall, when we originally did our Let's Encrypt certificate, we changed the admin insecure port to 8080, and we have opened up port 443 for communication to the FreePBX GUI. Now we're going to take this a little bit further and enable HTTPS provisioning ports as well. So the first thing we want to do is select our FQDN from the drop-down box, and then we have HTTP provisioning. The insecure port is port 84. We're going to turn on port 1443, which is the default HTTPS port for Sangoma phone provisioning or Endpoint Manager provisioning. Since we're in here, let's also set up the secure port for our phone apps, and I'm going to set that to port 4443. The phone apps, of course, are little applications such as voicemail and agent stuff for queue login, logout, follow me, those sorts of things that you can make buttons on these Sangoma phones. Okay, so we're going to set those ports and click Update Now. And then while we're still in sysadmin, let's scroll up and click on Provisioning Protocols. And then under Provisioning Protocols, here we can see our authentication. So here's our username and password for both HTTP and HTTPS authentication. We're going to change that to HTTPS only so that we're basically forcing these phones to use HTTPS to provision. Okay, save that setting. And now we need to set up the Endpoint Manager. So let's go over here to Settings, and then we're going to pull it down to Endpoint Manager and click on that. And then all of the settings are in this tray on the right-hand side. So the first thing we want to do is take a look at our global settings. And we need to put in an internal and external address. Now, if you have phones connecting from the outside world and from the inside world, you might want to populate both of these items. In my case, I have a hosted PBX, so essentially every single phone that's connecting to this server is external. But I'm going to go ahead and put in the same FQDN for both internal and external. So this can be an internal IP address, an external IP address, it can be a fully qualified domain name, and then you can use DNS to determine whether it's internal or external. The settings that you put in here are mostly going to depend on your own surrounding network infrastructure in relation to the PBX itself. Now down below we can see our secure provisioning port is 1443, and then we can also see our phone admin password. This is the default password for the phones when you want to log in via the GUI or make changes such as going into factory reset the phone. You're going to have to know this password. Sangoma default password or Endpoint Manager default password is 6 2s or 222222. Okay, let's go ahead and save that setting. And now there's a couple of extra things that we want to set up with our Sangoma phones. We're going to pull out the system tray, and we're going to come down here to Image Management. This is where we can add images to Endpoint Manager that can be used as the background of the display screen on the phone. So we're going to add a Crosstalk branded image that I've created, and we're going to upload that image to the server. Now if we go over here to Image Management again, we should see that we have one image here. It's specifically made for the Sangoma S500, which is the phone that we're going to be using in this demo setup that we're doing. We also need to make sure that we are telling the phones which firmware version to use. So we're going to pull out the side tray again, and now we're going to go to Firmware Management. And we want to choose the Sangoma S-Series phones. Now, if you have the paid Endpoint Manager and you have like, Yealink phones or Cisco phones or Polycoms, you're going to see all of those different brands that you've added by coming over here and add brand. Right here you can see in the side tray. You'll see all of those different brands show up here under Firmware Management, and then you can go in and basically do the exact same thing that I'm about to do with the Sangoma S-Series phones. So we're going to click on Sangoma S-Series, and then we have two different firmware slots. Now these firmware slots can be used if, for instance, you've got a whole bunch of Sangoma phones deployed and you want to have different versions of firmwares for different sets of phones, or if like Sangoma comes out with a new firmware and you want to put that in firmware slot 2 and then have some test phones that get the new firmware before you roll out that firmware to the rest of the phones. So in this case though, we're just going to use a single firmware slot, and we can see all of the available firmwares from like 1.35 to 1.66. We're just going to drag the latest firmware into firmware slot 1 and then click submit. Okay, so the Endpoint Manager has been all set up and it is ready for us to actually start creating some phone templates for the S-Series Sangoma phones. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by the good folks over at NextGen-T. If you're looking to enhance your skills or start a career as a network engineer or cybersecurity specialist, look no further than NextGen-T. NextGen-T is an online IT school offering real-world training on the latest technologies that's designed to launch your IT career in months rather than years. NextGen-T also offers an ISA, or income sharing agreement, meaning that you don't have to pay upfront for their training program. You pay back tuition for the school only when you're making over $40,000 per year in your new IT career. And NextGen-T's career services team will mentor and work with you to help you land your dream job. Demand for network engineers and especially cybersecurity specialists is at an all-time high, so there's no better time to get started with your IT career. I, for one, would have loved a program like this when I was just starting out, so make sure you click the link in the description of this video for more information about NextGen-T's next level IT training programs. All right, now back to the video. Okay, thank you so much for that. Back in the Endpoint Manager, let's pull out the side tray again, and this time we're going to click on the Sangoma brand. Then we have the S-Series phones, we're going to click on that, and we have the Sangoma default template. Now what I'm going to do, since you want to have a kind of a different template per phone model because of like the size of the display screen, if you're putting an image on the background of the phone and other items such as that, I'm going to click on the Sangoma default template. I'm going to click on the Tasks tab, and I'm going to click Duplicate. And so I'm going to call this one Default Sangoma S500, and then click Submit. Now the newest model of the Sangoma phone is the Sangoma S505. This template will work for either the S500 or the S505. The only difference is the S505 is a bit newer, and this is just an old test phone that I happen to have. So now that we've created a duplicate, we need to go into that template. Notice that we're still in the standard Sangoma default template. So we're going to pull out the side tray again, click on Sangoma under Brands, and then we're going to go into our S-Series phone, and now we have two different templates. So we're going to choose the Sangoma, or the default Sangoma S500 template that I just created, and now let's click on the General tab. So first and foremost, is this the default internal or external template? No, it is not, so we're going to say no. Now, which destination address are we using for the phones that are connecting to this template, or using this template to connect to the server? Here's internal or external. And remember, when we did the general settings for the Endpoint Manager, we could put in a separate internal or external FQDN or IP address. So this is where you would want to choose internal if you're using this for internal phones, and external if you're using it for external phones. In my case, since it's a hosted server, internal and external are exactly the same, so it doesn't actually matter which one of these I choose. I'm just going to choose external. For provisioning protocol, let's use HTTPS. For the provisioning address, we also want to use the external FQDN or IP address. For the phone apps protocol, we want to use HTTPS. And then force firmware version, here's where we can pick the firmware slot. If you have firmwares in both firmware slot 1 and firmware slot 2, they're both going to show up down here. We only have firmware slot 1 because that's the only one that I actually drag and dropped a firmware into. Okay, so next let's click on the Models tab. And here's all of the different phone models, and you can have multiple different types of phone models set up on these templates. Again, I typically recommend against that, because by and large, when you're setting up these templates, there's going to be settings that are custom or specific to the model of phone that you're setting up. So in this case, we've got this S500. It has a particular size in pixels display screen, so the background image that's going to go on the phone won't work on some of the other phone models, right? So we want to have a totally separate template for this. So I'm just going to choose S500. And then what we can do here is set up our phone buttons. Now, you'll see that by default, we have line key, line key, line key, intercom, and then all of these different phone apps that have been pre-configured for us. So this is pretty messy, right? We don't want all of this stuff. We're going to start very simple, and then we're going to build upon those phone apps as we move through this FreePBX series. So I'm going to choose a line key, line key. For line key 3, I will use one of the phone apps. So I'm going to choose XML API, and then I'm going to choose the voicemail phone app, and the label is going to be voicemail. For all of the rest of these for now, I'm just going to blank them out. So I'm going to choose nothing, 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 etc., on down the line till we've done this for every single one of the pre-populated buttons. Okay, so I've now blanked out all the buttons. We're going to save this model. Next, we're going to click on the regional tab, and my time zone is -8. So we're going to choose -8 for the time zone, and then I want my time format to be 12-hour format like so. Now let's click on the Options tab, and under Options for background image, I'm going to select the S500 background image that I uploaded previously. And then here we have a whole bunch of different settings. Now, the settings that you pick in here are going to vary, based on your organization's needs or based on an individual customer's needs if you're reselling phone systems. So what I typically do is I just come through here and I just give everything a quick brush through. I leave most of the stuff default because the default is usually okay in most cases. So like key press tone, configure whether a tone is heard when pressing keys on the phone. Let's go ahead and enable that. Voicemail tone, do you want to play a little beep beep when someone gets a voicemail? Yeah, let's go ahead and enable that. Hold tone, do you want to hear a tone when someone's left on hold? Now let's disable that because that's going to get pretty annoying. So you can see what I mean. Just keep scrolling through and set all of these different settings. For instance, contact photos, let's enable those. Let's enable missed call notifications. The dial now timeout is 2 seconds. When we dial a digit on the phone, do we want to just bring the display screen up, or do we want to bring the display screen up and dial the digit that we press? So we're going to say wake up and dial. If you have a three-way call, when we hang up a three-way call, are we connecting the remote two people together, or are we hanging up on both those people? So we'll hang up on both those people. And keep in mind, this is a template. So you're going to take a group of phones and assign them to this template. There might be different settings for different groups of phones within your organization. Some people might want, the three-way call release type to connect the remote parties, and other people might not want that, right? So you can create multiple templates for multiple different users. We have the BLF long press when idle state. We're going to set that to *80 so that when we long press a BLF key, remember that's a busy lamp field or the indication that someone else is on the phone. When we long press that speed dial /BLF key, it's going to intercom that person. Voicemail key, is it going to be the voicemail app, or are we just going to dial into voicemail with *97? Let's use the voicemail app since it's much more convenient. And on and on and on. Again, you guys can go through these settings and set them up how they best suit your own organization. So now, we've done all the settings. Let's go ahead and click Save, or Apply next to Save. And so now we have a phone template for our S500 phone. But we have not yet told FreePBX, hey, I've got such and such MAC address of phone, and I want it to use this phone template as this extension, right? So let's do that next. That's called device mapping. So we're going to pull out the side tray, extension mapping, and we're going to add an extension. So the extension that we're going to do is Dwight Schrute. Now notice that there's 5 different options for each of these extensions. Those are our 5 PJSIP contacts. So if I have this phone and another phone and another phone, I can make the first one Dwight Schrute 1, and then the second one Dwight Schrute 2, Dwight Schrute 3, etc., where you can have multiple devices connecting as a single extension. In our case, though, we only have one Dwight Schrute, so we're going to choose the first one. We're going to choose account 1. Typically, you're always going to choose account 1. These phones support up to 8 different SIP accounts, but again, 99.9% of the time, you're only going to use account 1. For the brand, we're going to choose Sangoma. For the MAC address, we're going to get out our barcode scanner and hit the MAC address real quick. Again, pro tip, get a barcode scanner if you're going to be doing lots of these phones. They're cheap. And then we have our template model is the default Sangoma S500 template that we set up. And the model of the phone that we're using is an S500. So now let's go ahead and save and rebuild configs. And this is now green. So if I make any changes to this extension that need to then regenerate the configuration for the extension, this will turn like this color of yellow that you see up in the banner up here. So extension rows highlighted yellow have not been rebuilt since changes were made to the template, right? So if you make template changes, you're going to want to come back here to extension mapping, and then for any extension that's yellow, you just want to regenerate the configs by checking the box and doing save and rebuild configs. All right, now that we've done all of these changes, let's go ahead and click Apply Config just to sort of lock those changes into the FreePBX. And the next thing that we need to do is set up our Sangoma redirect server. The Sangoma redirect server online is at portal.sangoma.com, and if you go to that URL, you can sign up for free and then add your server and add your phones so that when the phone is in a factory default state, it will reach out to portal.sangoma.com and find all of the information that it needs to connect to your hosted or on-premises server. All right, so here I am in the Sangoma portal. Again, it's portal.sangoma.com. I'm going to click on My Products, and I'm going to click on PBX. Then we're going to click List, and I want to search for the deployment ID of my PBX. Now, if you only have one PBX, it's just going to be the first one on the list here. But I've got, hundreds of phone systems in my Sangoma portal. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to search by deployment name, which is actually deployment ID. And then in the PBX, if I go to Admin, System Admin, Activation, here I can see my deployment ID. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to the Sangoma portal. I'm going to paste it in, and there we go. My FreePBX 101 version 15 test PBX shows up. So let's go ahead and edit that PBX. And then we want to go to the last tab over here, the Phones tab. We want to click on that. And here we can see that I have already input all of the information because I have actually already set this up for this server in preparation for this video. So we can see my provisioning protocol is HTTPS. My FQDN or IP address is testpbx.crosstalksip.com. And then we've got our username and password, which I'm going to re-input because I believe those are generated every time you do this. So let's go grab the username and password. And then the phone provisioning port is 1443. That's the HTTPS provisioning port that we set up earlier in this video. Now that I've got all of that set up, we're just going to scroll down to the bottom and click Update Redirection. So now we've told the Sangoma portal, hey, here's my server information with the username and password and port and protocol to log in and get configurations, but I now need to tell the Sangoma portal, hey, the MAC address of this specific phone needs to use that server information that I just input. So now let's look up our phone by MAC address. So we're going to click on My Products, we're going to click on Sangoma Phones, and we're going to click on List. For the search type, I'm going to drop it down and choose serial number, and then we're going to scan our MAC address again. So here's the MAC address. I'm going to edit this phone, and then right on the first page here, we see redirection settings. So let's click on that. And for this phone, this MAC address, we have enabled redirection. The redirection type is deployment, and then we are choosing to direct to this deployment ID for the FreePBX 101 version 15 test PBX. Once you've got all that information in, just go ahead and click Submit. And now this phone is all set up for zero-touch provisioning. So let's bring out my camera yet again. We're going to put the camera on the phone. Okay, so the camera is recording the phone. I'm going to factory default the phone. Menu, Settings, Advanced Settings. The password should be 222. Oh, no, it's not. It's admin by default, and then it's 222 once it actually provisions. So let's put in admin, A-D-M-I-N, enter. Now we want to go to phone setting, factory reset, and OK. So now this phone is going to factory reset, reboot. It's going to reach out to the redirect server and say, hey, I'm MAC address so-and-so. Where do I need to go? The redirect server is going to tell it, hey, go to this server information that was already put into the phone. And then the phone will reach out to the server, and the server will say, oh yeah, I know about you, MAC address so-and-so. Here is all of your configuration information. You are now extension 201. So without touching this phone, it should do all of that stuff, including updating the firmware if the phone's firmware needs to be updated, and then it will register with the server and we are good to go. There we go, there's our background, and the phone has successfully registered. So that took about 2 minutes from start to finish, and zero-touch provisioning just works. It works like magic. I absolutely love it. One more thing we should do with this phone before we end this video. As you can see, I have the factory plastic protector over the screen. Let's go ahead and peel that off, shall we? Alright, that makes me feel much, much better. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In our next video, we're actually going to set up some phones manually if you don't have the ability to do zero-touch provisioning. Alright, we will see you in the next one.